And then I discovered Bitcoin, and I realized that the best way to fix politics is to take the money out of it. And the best way to do that is to take away the money printer from the politician. The irony here is that his one job as a Reserve Bank governor is protect the value of the rand. And that is, well, allegedly, that's his job. Since the foundation of the Reserve Bank, the rand has lost 99.9% of its purchasing power. So he should be fired. The Reserve Bank should be disbanded. They're absolutely useless at their one job. They can't do it.
Is it possible to dismantle the Reserve Bank? Is it not too intertwined with the economy?
Those who get it first are going to have the biggest benefit, because then you get some Bitcoin, the other nation states start buying, it pumps your bags, the price of Bitcoin goes up, and the value of the Bitcoin they're holding now, they get more purchasing power.
By definition, states and governments are actually very skeptical of digital currencies, but is this changing now?
No, they love digital currency. They think it's the best thing ever. They just like digital currency that they're in control of. And there's a bunch of people in South Africa already that are living on a Bitcoin standard. And what that means is that they are earning their salaries in Bitcoin.
If people who lived in Zimbabwe at the time had Bitcoin instead of Zimbabwean dollars, how would things have been different?
You save in the strongest, it's the hard money thing. You save in the hard money, you spend the soft money, get rid of the soft money. And the rand is as soft as they come, really.
Welcome to the Pioneer Podcast. This is Aaron Struts, and we are sitting in a studio in Cape Town, speaking to you from our Cape Town studio, we can even say. And in today's conversation, we are speaking with Ricki Allardice, who we might just introduce as the Bitcoin guy. We're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about digital currencies, new technologies when it comes to this, but not so much how to make sense of this, but also what does this mean and how will this impact on our lives going forward? Ricki, thank you very much for joining us.
Adam, it's good to see you again. Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, so maybe you can explain, why are you the Bitcoin guy? What is it that you do, and why are you so passionate and so involved with this?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's a long story really, but I've always been very interested in politics, and when I found Bitcoin, by the time I found Bitcoin, I was quite disillusioned with politics already. I was like, this is a waste of time. We're never going to fix anything this way. And then I discovered Bitcoin, and I realized that the best way to fix politics is to take the money out of it. And the best way to do that is to take away the money printer from the politician. There's no one less trustworthy on earth than a politician, so why would we give them a money printer? And that's kind of how society runs presently, and Bitcoin fixes this. And that's kind of where it stems from for me. If we want to affect societal change that moves society in the right direction, and I believe that comes from using hard money, then Bitcoin is the answer for this.
And so you're one of the organizers of the Adopting Bitcoin conference, and you also work with us on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I am a co-organizer of the conference. I've been involved now, it's our second year that we're running. I kind of handle the payment side, so how we handle all of our Bitcoin payments, how our merchants get paid in Bitcoin, enabling all the attendees to pay in Bitcoin for as much as possible. And then I'm MC for the event as well. And then in my day-to-day capacity, I run a Bitcoin consulting firm, teaching people how to use Bitcoin, how to save in Bitcoin, how to secure their Bitcoin so they don't lose it. And then I also am the CEO of a company called Orania, which is a lightning payments company. We basically facilitate cross-border payments for remittance companies using Bitcoin in the middle. So very busy in the Bitcoin space these days.
So we had a very intriguing conversation just before we started recording, and I want to ask you about this, is about this debate about the currency. And we spoke about whether it might be a better idea to use biltong as currency in South Africa than South African rand.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
So the backstory is the Reserve Bank governor was recently at Davos, and he was asked a question about strategic Bitcoin reserve. And he kind of scoffed at the idea, and he made some jokes saying, why don't we have a strategic apple reserve or strategic beef reserve? My personal favorite was, he said, a strategic mutton reserve. Yeah. Now, he should have gone for lamb, not mutton. But anyway, that's his personal taste, I guess. But the funny part about this is that if he had have gone for a strategic beef reserve or built on reserve, it would have kept its purchasing power better than the rand over the past 5 years. And the irony here is that his one job as a Reserve Bank governor is protect the value of the rand. And that is, well, allegedly, that's his job. Since the foundation of the Reserve Bank, the rand has lost 99.9% of its purchasing power. So he should be fired. The Reserve Bank should be disbanded. They're absolutely useless at their one job. They can't do it. They can't protect the value of the rand. We all know that you look at a Spur menu from the 1980s and like a plate of chicken wings was like 2 rand. And now it's like,
I remember as a child buying a Coke for initially, I think, 1 rand 50 and then later 2 rand. My memory was a Coke was 2 rand and a packet of chips was 150.
Yeah.
And those chappies were, I think, 1
10
cent.
cents.
And then later they became 5 cents and then 10 cents. So, so, I mean, this is a serious thing about the Reserve Bank. Is it possible to dismantle the Reserve Bank? Is it not too intertwined with the economy? Do we need to, if that's the solution, how practical is it, or what ought to be done to achieve something like this?
So I think any centralized political solution is not viable. There's too much entrenched interest, there's too much inertia, too much momentum, too many vested interests to disband the Reserve Bank. But what Mises said is if we are ever to have a free money, we'll have to achieve it through some sly roundabout way. And that's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the sly roundabout way. And we're seeing it play out in real time now, where you're seeing nation states adopting Bitcoin. I mean, they're speaking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which means they're already buying.
So this is a new development because by definition, states and governments are actually very skeptical of digital currencies. But is this changing now?
They love digital currency. They think it's the best thing ever. They just like digital currency that they're in control of. I mean, 90% of rands are digital. Physical rands in circulation, are not. There's about 5%, 10%. Most of it is digital. And so what they want is the ability to more accurately control or effectively control inflation. Because really that's the two levers they have. The lever they have at the Reserve Bank is the interest rate, up or down. That's really what they can do. And that's how they try to manage the economy. And I mean, the entire premise of a central reserve bank is communist. You're centrally managing the price of money. And that has downstream effects for the entire economy. And you have a group of 12 eggheads sitting in a room thinking, okay, we are now going to decide what the price of money is at any point in time because we have perfect data coming in is just an absolutely ridiculous concept. But here we are.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you've spoken about this before, that the guy who prints the money that uses it first, he doesn't get the spin-off. It's the guy, the third or the fourth guy.
Yes. So the canelon effect, right? So there was was he Irish? I think it was an Irish economist, no, he was French, Cantillon. And the canelon effect is basically he who's closest to the money printer gets the most benefit. So how it works is like during COVID, for example, they print 500 million rand for the COVID relief fund. That money then gets spent into the economy. But where does it go first? It's not like it gets helicoptered into everyone's bank accounts in equal amounts. No, it goes to the politically connected first. The big contractors, the entrepreneurs, etc. They get the money first. And when they spend it, they don't experience inflation because it's the first time that money is being spent. It's only when that money gets spent the second, third, fourth time, the inflation really gets felt because now you feel the money supply increasing because inflation is just money supply increasing. And so all they're doing is they're robbing average citizens of their purchasing power. So for a Reserve Bank to say, okay, our inflation targeting is 2% or 5%, that's them saying we accept a rate of theft of 2% or 5% a year of your purchasing power. Like, how about 0? How about you don't steal from me? That'll be great.
Yeah.
Especially if I do that, if I print money, if I counterfeit money, if I increase the money supply, I go to jail. So why can a Reserve Bank do it? If we're a country of laws for the people, by the people, why are there a separate set of laws for a central bank versus me? And that central bank is privately owned as well. So the whole thing is a scam.
Yeah.
And their one job, like I said earlier, is to protect the value of the rand, which they failed at.
That's the one thing that they're destroying.
That's
apparently.
the one thing they're destroying every single time. So for them to then scoff at Bitcoin, to get back to the initial point, and say, this is ridiculous, a silly idea. I look at it from two ways. Firstly, I think it's great that they scoff at Bitcoin because that means they don't understand what's going on. And I don't know if you've read the book, The Sovereign Individual, it was published in 1997. Yes, by Rees-Mogg, by Jacob Rees-Mogg's father.
Yes.
Published in
William
1997.
Rees-Mogg.
Yes, William Rees-Mogg, yeah. And their thesis in the book was that individuals will rise and gain more sovereignty through technology and through internet money. They hypothesized internet money at that point in time. They didn't know anything about Bitcoin. It was still 12 years before Bitcoin. But the point of the sovereign individual thesis is that individuals can get as much power as nation states. And the only way you're going to get there presently is through Bitcoin. So if you can accumulate more Bitcoin than a nation state, you can be more powerful than a nation state. Elon Musk is definitely more powerful than many nation states presently. There's Bitcoiners out there whose names no one knows, who have more money than nation states do. And so that's playing out. So for me to see the Reserve Bank scoffing at Bitcoin, oh, good, great, fantastic. You guys don't buy it, because the state as a entity needs less power for us to be able to thrive. So I think that's great. But then the second order here is that, like, okay, there's 21 million Bitcoin ever. Nation states are going to start rushing to get as much of it as they can. Those who get it first are going to have the biggest benefit, because then you get some Bitcoin, the other nation states start buying, it pumps your bags, the price of Bitcoin goes up, and the value of the Bitcoin they're holding now, they get more purchasing power. So there's like game theory going on here for who gets it first. But the nation states who get it last are going to be impoverished. And so it kind of cuts both ways. So if your nation state is impoverished and you live in that country, there are negative consequences for you. But if you have a bunch of Bitcoin and the nation state is impoverished, you have more freedom as well. So
yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. So the nation state gets it last, but the people who live there have it.
Get it first. Yeah. It changes the politics of your country completely, because political power in a country, largely money is power. It's a proxy for power. But if Bitcoin is, if code is speech and speech is freedom, then Bitcoin is freedom, because Bitcoin is code. So if we can acquire more Bitcoin than the nation state, in our individual capacities, we can actually attain political power. Because when the turnaround comes and there's like a shakeout of who's really got the power here, we want the Bitcoiners to come out on top. And that means the freedom-oriented people can come out on top. So long story short, the Reserve Bank of South Africa must have fun staying poor.
Just for some context for viewers who might not know, talk to us a bit about the value of Bitcoin. There's that story, there must be a bunch of stories. But the one story I heard was a guy who, right when it started, spent the amount that he would pay for a pizza to buy Bitcoin, and eventually he sold his Bitcoin. But
so the guy's name is Laszlo, and he was the first one to do a Bitcoin transaction for a real world good, and he bought 2 pizzas. Yes, that's for 10,000 Bitcoin. And they made the deal. He was in America. He got a guy in the UK who was willing to pay with his credit card for 2 pizzas from Papa John's in the US. So he sent the Bitcoin to the guy in the UK. He then paid with his credit card. Anyway, he paid 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas. A Bitcoin is now 2 million rand. So what's 2 million rand times 10,000?
Yeah, that's billions.
Billions. But let's not feel too sorry for him. He invented GPU mining. So he had a lot more than 10,000 Bitcoin. So he's fine. Don't worry about Laszlo. But the point is, current free market currency it's not fiat. You can't just decree it into being. It has to follow an adoption curve. Yeah. So we have to go through this phase of people spending 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas before we can get to using it as money in our everyday life. It's not, it's not fiat. So it can't just be decreed. It's got to actually be organically adopted by people, and price discovery has to be met organically around the world. So, we laugh at the 10,000 Bitcoin now, but if I go out today and I buy a coffee with Bitcoin and that coffee costs me 35 Rand, and let's say whatever, I spend however many sats it is, 5,000 Satoshis or whatever, in 10 years time, I'm going to look at that and be like, oh my goodness, that coffee,
you shouldn't have done that.
That coffee cost me, 20,000 Rand in today's value. But the point is, we need to spend Bitcoin. We have to get the circular economy going. So this thing, it's like a flywheel,
That's what I wanted to ask you about, because most people think of it now, it seems to me, as an investment. You buy it and you hold on to it. But the point is for it to become something that people do transactions with. So will that become the norm eventually, and when?
It is. It's happening. It's happening already. There's a bunch of people in South Africa already that are living on a Bitcoin standard. And what that means is that they are earning their salaries in Bitcoin. We live in a digital world where people work globally. you've got remote work. So if you're a software developer, for example, and you're based in South Africa and you're working in the time zones, like 2 time zones either side of South Africa, you've got from the UK, Europe, Middle East, all covered, and you can work in South Africa. But your cost of living in South Africa is lower than any of those places. So you can compete with developers, for example, that are based in the UK. Their cost of an apartment in London is maybe £2,500 a month. That's like 60,000 Rand a month. Whereas you can pay for that same quality apartment, 20,000 Rand a month in South Africa. So if you're earning Bitcoin and living in South Africa, it makes perfect sense because your cost of living is lower and you can bill people globally. You don't have to deal with Forex issues and all that. People can just pay you in Bitcoin. And so then those people have to spend their Bitcoin on a monthly basis to survive, because they have to sell. And so that's what drives like the next phase in the adoption curve of Bitcoin. It goes from collectible, like just an interesting thing that people collected and they had like millions of them, and then they had to spend 10,000 for a pizza. Then it moves into store of value phase. And this is normally how the adoption of private money goes. It goes into store of value phase, where now it's increasing in value because more people want it. And then it moves into medium of exchange. And that's now where we're at, where people who are earning Bitcoin are having to spend it on a daily basis. And that drives the flywheel.
I see. So, and then the other point I think that's important is Zimbabwe has been used as an example with the spectacular crash that we saw then, was it 2003, 2004? If people who lived in Zimbabwe at the time had Bitcoin instead of Zimbabwean dollars, how would things have been different?
Our mutual friend Russell Mberti has written a book about this, what happened in Zimbabwe, and there's a couple of issues what happened. Obviously they had the currency collapse, and then they had the borders being controlled for people moving money out of the country. So for example, if you lived in Zimbabwe and you wanted to take dollars in cash out of the country, you stood a real risk of having those money confiscated from you at the border, just like your farm was confiscated, And if you had gold bars, you sit with the same problem. So you can have your gold confiscated at the border. And this happens to people all the time. Bitcoin would have changed this, because you can cross the border with 12 words in your head. You can memorize 12 words that can control all of the wealth of the world, not just your own personal wealth. You can store the whole world's wealth in one seed private key of Bitcoin. And you can't be stopped, because they cannot know that someone walking across the border has all that value in their head. And so that would have completely changed the game for Zimbabweans fleeing the oppressive regime. And we actually saw this happen in Ukraine. So war in Ukraine breaks out 22nd of February, 2 years ago. And they shut the borders in 6 hours, because the first thing that the Ukrainian government does is, we need bodies. We need men to throw into the meat grinder. So 6 hours after the Russians invade, they close the borders. And so the men who got out are the ones who are still alive today and haven't been dying senselessly on the front. They're the ones who had Bitcoin, because they didn't have to go to an ATM to draw cash. So the main points of exit, most of them are going to Hungary, Poland, etc. But they had to go and draw Ukrainian currency from the ATM so they could pay for things in these foreign countries. Obviously, there were massive queues at the ATMs because everyone wanted cash. And the men who didn't have to go to the ATM, who just had their Bitcoin, cross the border, they're the ones who got out, because in 6 hours those borders are closed, and those men are largely dead now, which is horrific. But that's the reality of this, that you can move, because your Bitcoin doesn't move. Your Bitcoin lives in cyberspace, so you don't need to move it. You just move, and there's real power there.
But so the practically the issue here, I would say, is that largely due to the fact that people don't do, or you say people do a lot of transactions now already, but I don't know if people who buy pizza with Bitcoin now, they might be, but so it's not practical to have everything in a currency like Bitcoin. So it seems to me that the answer is to have some form of both, or some balance.
So at the conference tomorrow, you as a speaker will be getting a card that we've loaded up with some Satoshis on the Lightning Network, which we've enabled all the vendors at the conference to accept Bitcoin via Lightning. So you'll be able to actually go and buy your lunch and breakfast and all the rest in Bitcoin. And you'll see just how simple it is. But the point you're making here is that rands and Bitcoin are coexisting, and absolutely, why not both? Because why would you spend your Bitcoin, which is increasing in value, when you've got rands that are decreasing in value? And also merchants that you're paying for day-to-day things. You have your tire change in a car, you got to pay them in rands. So the important part is the bridge between the two. And that's what we're working on with my company Orange, is the bridge between Bitcoin and fiat. So being able to make living on Bitcoin really easy and pay out fiat, as you need to. And so you save in the strongest, it's the hard money thing. You save in the hard money, you spend the soft money, get rid of the soft money. And the rand is as soft as they come, really.
Of course. And so the last year, especially the last few years, but especially the last year, had some very big developments on the political front all over the world, in South Africa, but also in America and in Europe. It seems as if there's, in South Africa at least, a significant disillusionment with the South African government and with the ANC. Voter turnout was the lowest it's ever been since 94, and the ANC has dropped from, 50-something to 40%. And in America, Donald Trump came back, and many countries in Europe swung to the left. Even countries like England and Poland, where the prime minister is more on the left, that largely happened because the parties on the right were sort of splintered. They were. So the question is, how does this affect the Bitcoin community? Is this good news or bad news, or what do you foresee?
The honey badger doesn't care. The Bitcoin honey badger doesn't care, because you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And this is the reason why it's apolitical, because it's code that runs on a decentralized network of millions of computers around the world. And Bitcoin itself has no idea of politics. It's unable to. It's just a very, very simple system, actually. And so politicians now start jockeying around it because it's the only scarce asset, provably scarce asset in the world. And so it's more interesting to see how society is adapting to Bitcoin and not Bitcoin adapting to society. That's really what we see happening. Because we had, we probably spoke about Bitcoin first, 5 years ago. And we're in a very different place today versus where we were then in terms of adoption. Like no nation state was talking about Bitcoin. And now we have Donald Trump launching shitcoins, like right before he was inaugurated. I mean, he launched the Trump meme coin on Solana, and then his wife Melania did one, and it was like a pump and dump. It's outrageous that we have a president doing pump and dumps. That's ridiculous. And this is where the differentiation between Bitcoin and crypto must be made. Crypto is just a sign of the times, degenerate gambling. I mean, it's like we see sports betting proliferating. It's the same thing with crypto. It's just people gambling. And Bitcoin is a very serious business of separating money and state, like we separated church and state. So those two things are very different. And I think we see this playing out more and more now as society, the pendulum of society is swinging back to the right. We had this mad period of leftism and people are hurtful, and the pendulum's swinging back. And with the swing to the right, there's a whole bunch of cultural things that come with it. And one of them is a reversion to sound money. I mean, you've seen the conversation of like national debt, and spending within your means, keep balancing the budget. All of those conversations are coming back to the fore now because sanity is coming back. And I think this is where Bitcoin really plays a big role, because as people realize, okay, we're swinging back to the right, and as they get disillusioned with the people that they thought were going to be the leaders on the right that are going to fix things, they're going to realize many problems don't get fixed. Because money printer is still going brr, and politicians are still politicians, and people who thought on the right are not, who thought were right wing are not really right wing. And this is where Bitcoin fixes this, because we as individuals can be like, okay, I don't have to place my faith and hope in a politician anymore. I can just accumulate Bitcoin and accumulate power that way. And eventually, the institutions and organizations that adopted first will accumulate more power and be able to affect real political change that way, just through sound money. And that's what I'm really excited about, to see organizations like, and South Africa is a prime case for this. We have a useless government that is, dare I say, functionally retarded, that, cannot tie their own shoelaces. And this is a great thing, because if they are unable to understand what's going on in terms of the big power shifts happening in money and in Bitcoin, we are able to, through some sly roundabout way, take back more power. And organizations like Solidariteit, AfriForum, Sakelige, etc., that can affect real change in society through their members as a real grassroots movement. This is what I'm very excited about, because we can just outmaneuver the nation state and build our own parallel structures and come out ahead.
Is it still a thing for Bitcoin, I've heard talk about this more with other cryptos, but for it to be, in a sense, customized for a community to say, because there was Orania as a good example. They had some talks a few years ago about whether they should have some form of a digital currency. Is that a thing that you think might happen, where there would be different customized versions of it?
I think it will definitely happen, but I think it's a terrible idea. So, but this is the beauty of the free market. We are free to go and test things. And this is, I mean, the cryptocurrency scene was built on cypherpunk ideals of free markets and free expression. And so I think crypto in general is just a grift. It's just people who've come after Bitcoin and they're like, we want the private money printer now. It's just a privatized money printer is all crypto is. Like if you can go and print a bunch of Cardano tokens or Ethereum, best case. Ethereum had a pre-mine, they producing Ethereum tokens. It's just a grift. And it's now private individuals figuring out they can print money and get people's Bitcoin from them in exchange for this. But what will really happen is over time, people will realize that the real store of value and the real innovation here is Bitcoin. And so like Orania, for example, they have the Ura, which they use. It's just pegged to the Rand, right?
Yes.
So it's pegged to the Rand shitcoin, which is like, no, the Orania guys, I love what they're doing. I think it's amazing what they've built there. I think it would be an absolute shame to undo all of their hard work by tethering their wagon to the Rand. Because the Rand's going one way. It's just going down. So what I would love to see happen in Orania is the grassroots adoption of Bitcoin, and not from a top-down approach where the management of Orania is like, we're adopting Bitcoin. The individual members just move their savings over bit by bit into Bitcoin, and then organically they adopt a Bitcoin standard. I mean, Orania is already much more wealthy by orders of magnitude than all the surrounding towns.
Yes.
And that comes down to culture and management. And putting rocket fuel on that would then be saving in Bitcoin and not saving in Rands or in the Ura. Because they're losing 10-15% of their purchasing power every year because the Rand is devaluing. Imagine if they were gaining on average 50%, which is what Bitcoin has done for the past 10 years.
Well, there's some talk in and with regard to Orania, to use that as an example, because I think it's a good practical example for the discussion we're having about whether they should put the Ura, the currency, it's like a coupon system in a certain sense, whether they should link it to the dollar as opposed to the Rand. And one of the disadvantages thereof could be barrier to entry. So in other words, as people outside of the town who might want to move to the town are linked to the Rand, and this town is linked to the dollar, to a certain point the gap might be too big and it might be too difficult to actually move in. Is this something that might be an issue with Bitcoin?
I mean, the value of something, Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million units. So one Bitcoin is divided into 100 million Satoshis. So you don't have to buy one Bitcoin. You can buy 1,000 Satoshis, So presently, one Satoshi is worth 2 South African cents because it's 2 million Rand a Bitcoin. So it's very easy for someone to move across, regardless of how little money you have. So that barrier to entry is artificial in terms of Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
But what I really think Orania, I mean, I don't want to prescribe them what to do, but they're investing heavily in energy infrastructure at the moment because load shedding was a big problem for them. And they are investing in their own solar farms. I mean, they're in the middle of the Northern Cape. They have more sun than they know what to do with. So there is a case to be made that they can overdevelop their solar capacity and finance that by bringing in Bitcoin miners. So they then enter a rev share agreement with the Bitcoin miners, let's say, 50-50 rev share. And that way, let's say they overbuild their solar capacity by 300%. So they've got 2,000 people in the town, they've got enough capacity for 6,000 people now. They then, from day one, from second one, when they turn on that power plant, they mine Bitcoin with all of the surplus. And as their power demands for industrial, commercial, and residential power grows, they turn off miners over the next few years and reduce miners. So they can, in other words, monetize 100% of their energy production. And this is very different from a normal power plant, right? So if you build a power plant with a 30-year time horizon, you are eating the cost of that plant initially because you're always going to overbuild capacity with a power plant. And then you can't sell it back into the grid. I mean, you can, but you're going to be getting cents on the rand for your kilowatt hours, and you're dealing with a hostile state. Remember, the ANC government, the South African government, is doing everything in their power to make Orania fail. So expect all kinds of chicanery. So if you deploy Bitcoin miners, you can mine with your surplus power capacity as much as you can, consume all of that, and turn all of that into Bitcoin. And then that Bitcoin enters your economy in Orania immediately, because that Bitcoin's got to be spent now, right? So all of a sudden now people are getting paid in Bitcoin for goods and services in Orania. And that's for me, I think it's an absolute no-brainer for them. They can bootstrap their power production, pay for it, instead of in 30 years, it pays for itself in 5 years because the price of Bitcoin has gone up and you've built yourself a nice reserve now. You can get mining experts who run mining farms professionally to come in and do the whole thing. You don't have to run it yourself. And you accumulate Bitcoin on your balance sheet of the town, which is a corporation, as I understand. And you become a citadel. You become essentially you can turn into like a principality, because with money you can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so that, I think Orania is a perfect use case for it. If they want to be left alone and do what they want to do, you need money for that.
Yeah.
And it would be an absolute shame if everything was undone by the rand hyperinflating, which is coming. You know, it's just a matter of time before the rand hyperinflates.
Yes.
And then all of your hard work, all of your infrastructure, all of your planning, all of your culture gets undone, because nothing destroys culture faster than hyperinflation.
Yes, and so the government response to something like hyperinflation would be print more money.
It's all they can do.
And they would have more centralized government policies, like tax people more, and then the government needs to employ more people, and it's like a vicious circle.
Yeah.
But so the question then is, what is the dynamics with Bitcoin, something like Bitcoin, and taxation? How would taxation work?
Right.
With something like Bitcoin?
So it makes it much more honest, because in a Bitcoin world where you self-custodying your Bitcoin, the state can't unilaterally take your Bitcoin. They have to ask for it. There has to be voluntary consent.
Yes.
Because it's defended by a massive wall of energy. So presently, if you owe SARS money, they'll take it out your bank account. They'll just take it. And you know, now please come back, you know, and ask them, please can I have my money back? Because let's say the government took twice as much tax as they should have out of your account. They'll do it. And now you must go to fight SARS and spend more money to get that money back. It could take you a year or two or three or never to get your money back. On a Bitcoin standard, they can still levy taxation and they can still keep you under the threat of jail, which means you'll pay your taxes because no one wants to go to South African jail. But now they have to ask you. And this changes the power dynamic completely, where they can't just unilaterally take it out of your account. And the same applies to municipalities. Like if you're a municipality and you want to withhold taxes, if you're withholding your taxes in your ABSA bank account, they'll just take it. But if you are keeping your taxes in Bitcoin, now they must come and negotiate with you. And it all of a sudden it changes the force dynamic. They have to spend money on force, which costs them a lot to go and, you know, send in the army or and they don't want to get into an altercation. So it changes. I think it makes a more peaceful society. We actually have to ask permission. There's a voluntary system in place.
The government has less power.
Government has less power at the end of the day.
But I think also maybe sort of a macro point here is that the state as we know it doesn't seem to be sustainable, especially with things like Bitcoin coming in, but also the disillusionment, the fact that all over the world, it's by definition, people don't trust the government, they don't trust the state, and there's a growing gap between the leaders and the led, so to speak. It doesn't seem like it's sustainable, and I think something like Bitcoin might be the sort of the trigger, or one of the triggers, or one of the major steps towards sort of rethinking the way we structure our societies.
I mean, it's a complex system, right? It's not. Bitcoin isn't the only lever that's being pulled here. The other main concern really is that people have is, what about volatility? I mean, Bitcoin is now, whatever it is, $105,000 a Bitcoin. It was 93 like 2 weeks ago. And so the volatility is an issue for people over the short term. And so this is where, like, go back to the Orania example, pegging yourself to the US dollar or keeping Bitcoin as your reserve currency and using US dollar stablecoins for day-to-day, like your checking account transactions. Because you can, in a trustless manner, swap between Bitcoin and stablecoins without a without an intermediary, without a regulated third party that's going to stop you. So, for example, Orania can move over to US dollars tomorrow, spending dollars in all of their shops, and they just change their prices to dollars. They'll have less inflation because the dollar inflates less than the rand. And then they can convert to Bitcoin and save in Bitcoin. So you can have the best of both. And this is the hybrid system I think we're going to start seeing, where the dollar is still the king of global shitcoins, and people are going to move to the dollar because it's the prettiest horse at the glue factory, you know? But it's still inflating. But they'll move to the dollar in the short term and then peg that to Bitcoin, and over time interact with those two. But I'm very interested to see, that's, you know, one aspect, the money aspect, but how does like this decentralized culture form? Where,
yes, exactly.
You know, where we are I think there's a reinvigoration of culture and cultural identity that's happening around the world. And I think South Africa was on the forefront of that for, you know, the past 20 years. What you guys have been doing at AfriForum previously, and now Solidarity, is building strong cultural institutions.
Yes.
And that's
parallel to the state, or outside the realm of the state.
Absolutely. So when the hyperinflation comes, you have not just money, but you've got culture and identity, and you've got cultural memes, you know, common thought processes that play out. And that's how you stop the collapse of certain cultural groups in society. And I mean, I've heard you mention this a few times, you can't save everyone. People have to save themselves, and people therefore have to organize to save themselves. And organizing the money is just one very small component of, you know, saving your culture and your way of life, really.
Yeah.
And I personally wish that all the different cultural groups in South Africa would do exactly the same as what you guys are doing at AfriForum. Go out there, preserve your culture, protect your culture.
Start institutions. Start organizing and start projects and do things yourself.
Yeah. Like the Zulus, for example, the Zulu Kingdom. I wish them absolutely well. They should be starting their own Zulu schools, you know, Zulu universities outside of the state, you know. And they have a large group of people that are culturally homogenous, that share the same values and culture in arguably one of the most beautiful and fertile places on earth. Go for it, guys. Build yourselves an institution and do it on Bitcoin, like, because the ANC's gonna rug pull you.
Yeah, I can only imagine if we had the Zulu Bitcoin, or if the Zulus became the pioneers of Bitcoin, that would be something. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it'd be amazing. Amazing. It does then open a whole other geopolitical can of worms further down the line, because now you have some states that adopted Bitcoin, or some groups that adopted Bitcoin in certain regions, and others that didn't. And you can have a very strong versus weak dynamic forming. For example, if Botswana adopted Bitcoin and just went super hard, and actually Botswana is a bad example because they don't have energy. Mozambique adopts Bitcoin and they go super hard into Bitcoin, and they say, all this natural gas we found, we're not going to bother selling it to anyone else. That's a mission. We've got to purify it, ship it, put it on the ship, build a pipeline. No. We're putting mines in northern Mozambique, in Pemba. We're just putting Bitcoin mines down and we're mining Bitcoin. And they just accumulate a bunch of Bitcoin that way. All of a sudden, Mozambique can have more power than South Africa. And then, thankfully, we had the Zulus to buffer us on the north. And hopefully they have Bitcoin. But this is what happens. Like, you can have nation states, borders are going to change because of the power that money brings, obviously. And it becomes the game theory is going to be crazy. Who scrambles to get Bitcoin first?
Yeah.
We see
that's
happening.
That's really fascinating. Well, Ricki, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. It's a fascinating conversation, and it's really something that I can see is already changing the world and will continue to change the world. And I think there are a lot of people out there who know about this, but they're not quite sure, or they're a bit sort of scared to sort of become too involved or touch it. But it's something that people should really look into. Yeah.
I think this, just a final point, I think what the scary part for people is that there's so much noise. There's so much noise with crypto. There's 2 million other coins out there, and they're all vying for attention. They're trying to steal your money. That's what it comes down to. They're trying to steal your Bitcoin. And what I say to people is, it becomes really simple. Just accumulate Bitcoin every week, every month. Just buy some, get some, and focus on what you're good at in life. It's that simple. You don't have to care about price. You don't have to try to trade. You don't have to any of that. Focus on what you're good at, where your skill set lies, where you generate value for other people, and how you generate value for yourself. Take that extra surplus value, that money, and buy Bitcoin and carry on with your life, and reevaluate in 10 years' time when you're on your yacht. That's a simple or on your game phone.
I know a guy in New York who basically did that, and he now owns a building in Manhattan, like a skyscraper building.
And that's a terrible investment. He should have bought more Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because now he's got to maintain it and paint it and the taxes and the vagrants. And no, it's a terrible idea. But eventually, when Bitcoin gets fully monetized, the price appreciation is going to slow down. And then things like real estate make more sense from an opportunity cost because it generates yield and all of that. Mm-hmm. But presently, I think it's just a scramble to accumulate as much as you can because it's blown any other asset out the water for the past 10 years.
Yes, it's
with zero maintenance cost. And you can sell a fraction of a Bitcoin. You can't sell a fraction of your apartment. That's the thing. And then you've got, everyone's fingers in your pockets when you're dealing with a transaction.
Yeah.
So very interesting. I look forward to hearing your talk at the conference tomorrow. It's going to be great, and it's going to be a very, very exciting.
Thank you. Well, I think for the listeners, I think so just so they know, this is obviously recorded in advance. So by the time you get to view this, the conference would have passed already. But it will also be online. I think people will be able to go back and watch the speeches and the conference.
Yeah, so Adopting Bitcoin Cape Town is the name of the conference. We'll be on YouTube. It'll be live streamed. Then the videos will be there after the fact. It's just streaming. If we get our X account back up, our X account got taken down yesterday for some reason. We'll be live streaming on X. We're on Nosta as well. But yeah, we've got plenty of footage that's going to be coming out.
Well, best of luck and thank you very much. Great
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Adam Strutz. If you support this podcast and the work that we are involved with as the Afrikaner Foundation and the broader solidarity movement in South Africa, I want to encourage you to become a more active supporter. You can do this first and foremost by subscribing to our various social media channels, by leaving a comment and sharing what you have seen. But other than that, also by making a small monthly contribution to the work that we are doing through the Afrikaner Foundation's website or by making a once-off donation. Links in the description.